Hello, Robbie.
Howdy. How's
How are you, my
things?
friend? Things
Very
are
good.
super good. Super good. How about
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah, really good. Really good. Been out for an early walk as soon as it was light. It's autumn here, and we had like 90 degrees the other day, and then last night there was not a frost here, but probably down the road there was a frost. So yeah, risk.
That's awesome. I see the pictures you posted of your view. They're beautiful.
Yeah. I've just been out doing something, and then I was driving along, and I thought, look at the sunset. So I did a quick U-turn and parked the car and stood on the sidewalk right by the beach, and it was a stunning sunset. Yeah, it's amazing. It is
I
pretty
love
good.
that. I love that stuff. That's great. Absolutely. So you were inspired to have a unique topic for our discussion today, which I really am grateful and thankful for.
Oh, well, not exactly a topic, but just a way of approaching things.
A theme.
A theme. Okay. So tell us the theme.
Well, I think it's interesting. So we spend a lot of time, I think, because we're excited about the information or in the approach to life that we've been reading about, for years. And I think a lot of the information has been recycled and maybe just positioned differently. But some of the information that we're getting from the Joshua teachings is unique and new. So we're constantly talking about I think the different concepts that we're getting from Joshua Live, the podcast, which is amazing, and from Gary Bodley when he channels Joshua. And I think the idea that today we've been doing this for almost a year, you and I, hey, without speaking intentionally speaking from Joshua's perspective, or let's just say Tony Robbins' perspective, or somebody out there,
Writing somebody. Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
right? How are you seeing life? How are you seeing these things now with all of
Yeah.
these, with
Yeah.
this amalgamate, right?
Yeah, so some of that really is whether one, not you or I feels that we have authority to actually say the stuff as ourselves rather than quoting somebody for affirmation or evidence, or in other words, at some point, one walks into owning all these ideas and living these ideas, and they become part of who you are without. I mean, it's one thing to give credit to somebody for a great idea or something, or some, IP or some material that's original. And obviously we want to give credit where it's due, but it's another thing whether one speaks from one's own truth or whether one speaks quoting other authorities. And the whole point of this work really is to integrate it into your life so that it is who you are. And then there's another high level concept in the Joshua sign off. They often say in the written stuff something like, with our love we are Joshua. So some would say that we is an inclusive we, which means us and everyone else. So in other words, it's not an us and them, and if you believe in that unity and oneness concept, then we are all one anyway. So I just thought it would be a good transition to start to make, to become consciously aware of, why don't I speak from my own truth instead of quoting other people? That's really it's a point in one's development and confidence in speaking about this material, because to be quite honest, if I go back when I started doing those boot camps and things, I really didn't want anybody I knew to know that I was doing this crazy wacko stuff, in case they thought I had a screw or more loose. And I've noticed that I mostly forgotten about that. And there's a few people that I haven't spoken to about this sort of crazy stuff. For example, we get information from a guy who channels dead people. It sounds pretty wacko, doesn't it? And he says that himself too. And so it's like, yeah, it is kind of wacko, but if you forget about all that and just look at the inherent logic and wisdom of the teachings, then it is very compelling. And I think if you look at things, for example, like the limiting belief process, it has some unique differences, but it's also pretty similar to what you might find with reframing, the sort of work that a psychotherapist or a psychologist might do. That's sort of those sorts of things exist in other domains, and there's a lot of limiting belief work out there as well done by those sorts of people. So in this new course that we're making, I've got a whole section now around limiting beliefs, because I'm just going to shut my WhatsApp because everyone's talking to me and I'd rather talk to you. And so because I realized that talking to people like coaches, counselors, therapists, and so on, those people, consultants and the like, they frequently have real hang-ups or mental blocks or problems with issues such as money and billing and charging and getting a good price, marketing, and also selling. Like you and I find it relatively easy to sell compared to most people. And some people would say a natural salesman, and that might be true, but that's not true of your typical coach or spiritual healer, for example. And they have all sorts of angst and all sorts of issues and problems around that. And selling to them doesn't come naturally at all. And when I describe sales processes and techniques and approaches, you can see this is the first time they've ever heard this stuff, probably because they couldn't listen to it before or didn't receive the message. So anyway, we put into this course a whole section, a whole big module about processing limiting beliefs. But I thought, I want this to reach a general audience, not just woo-woo converts. So I put that process in, really saying that there are elements of reframing in there, and it's not too different from what a lot of therapists and counselors and psychotherapists are doing. So what I'm saying is that you can look at the woo-woo aspect of it, or you can actually look at some of those processes which are not dissimilar or out of place in psychology, for example. And the material, typically, when you start to analyze what's being said, it is ruthlessly logical. It's the logic, it's compelling, because once you start thinking it through, there are ideas that might surprise you, but then you start to think about them and you think, well, actually, if I was really honest and got down to the foundation of what that's all about, then it is true. It may sometimes these ideas take a bit of accepting, but it is ruthlessly logical. So that's what I really want to say, is that we can look at it, and I did look at it in the past as woo-woo stuff, but other people have said to me, well, you don't have to put it that way, and you don't have to describe all of those parts of it, but it doesn't prevent you from sharing the wisdom with people.
I love that. And, I think, you said I took some notes here. You said some really powerful things. And one of the reasons why I continue to quote, different people that I've worked with, right, or people that have written books, is to validate what I'm saying. There's no question that I didn't truly believe in myself, right? So it made it easier when you were talking about somebody who was an author, who was somehow more accomplished, right? And you could quote them, you were able to take on their accomplishments and then validate what you were saying in that way, right? So what you're asking for today is to speak from your heart, is really to let go of all of those trappings, right? All of those, the trappings of the illusion, and just say, hey, what do you think and how powerful is that?
Yeah, well, if I look at the work I do, and I'm sure you find the same thing, that I know a lot of stuff about particular things. I know a lot of stuff about particular things, and when I talk to people about it, it's very clear these days that what they are receiving is, okay, this guy knows a lot about this particular topic, and they accept that. I don't have to quote any authority, and it's a partly a self-belief thing, I suppose, to stand in your own authority, your self-sovereignty, or whatever you want to call it, and to just speak your truth, knowing that it is truth, and it'll resonate with some people and not with others.
I think I'm just getting to that point, right? And I think I was talking to my cousin whose son has a significant number of learning disabilities according to traditional school, and he's let's say he's 6 or 7 or 8 at this point. And I look back at myself. So I've currently held. I went from a mailroom. Literally, I am that movie guy, right? 1990, I started in a mailroom of a company. 10 years later, I was running their Chicago division as an EVP, making 7 figures, right? So and then I started my own company. Then I started another company. Then I was a board member on another company. Then I became an investor. and I became multiple investors. Then I had actually took companies into bankruptcy, took companies out of bankruptcy. So I did all that. But if you go back to my schooling, I in 11th grade, I was an exceptional athlete being asked to play at all these different colleges. I was reading on a second grade level. My mother, and amazing woman she was able to, and I was rejected at the college I ended up going to, rejected. My mother called because she knew somebody, and she was in the educational system, and was able to shuffle me through there. In that college, my first year, I was in a remedial group with 10 people that literally in college at the age of 18, I went to every class with these 10 people. And my freshman year had a 0.06. It's that Animal House video, right? Where the Dean Wormer saying to John Belushi, 0.00 is no way to go through, fat and dumb and drunk is no way to go through life. I lived that. And then the limiting belief I had was that I'm not smart enough to do anything. Right. So anytime I said anything, I was always referencing somebody else.
Yeah, I
my
get that.
fear was that
and you
I'm not smart
explained
enough.
to me that one of the things you put up on a pedestal, or that embodied that, was the whole Ivy League thing, and that's translated for both of us, that we feel that we need to quote various people, or sometimes get the approval of various people who we consider to be luminaries, rather than, you can see what I'm saying, as one becomes self-actuating and stands on one's own authority and self-sovereignty. And at that point, one doesn't feel the need anymore to reference those people or to seek their approval. And your Ivy League thing was a very good example. You moved on from that. But I think another trap for you and for me can be, well, if so-and-so thinks that I'm really doing well in this thing, then I must be. And some of the luminaries, right, who we won't name, that who are friends of ours. And to me, it's another step in that whole worthiness thing, really. I mean, this is kind of personal or raw subject for both of us, but it's about worth and worthiness, and accepting expertise and knowledge and experience and some wisdom, and then sharing
it. And you said it beautifully, right? And then we've been sold this bill of goods, and no disrespect to, and I forget the woman's name, the TED Talk, Fake It Till You Make It, an amazing story, right? The professor from Harvard that did the Fake It Till You Make It, and then the imposter syndrome. See, those just fed into the fact that we weren't good enough, that you're not really there, that you're not smart enough. When in reality, the only thing you have to do is believe it until you achieve it. Because the only thing you need to do in life is believe in yourself. Once you believe in yourself, once you truly, truly believe, that vibrational signal, that alignment aligns with all of these other opportunities in life. Now, if you're constantly thinking you're a faker, you're not able there, I'm an imposter, I don't deserve this, well, then you're going to live your life that way, thinking that way. See, we've been told and indoctrinated, even when you're not there, when you're not good enough, fake it till you make it. We're going to ensure that you continue, don't believe in yourself. Society has done that. These teachings have gotten me to the point, and it will allow me to expand upon your original theme of this. I now, and I'm posting some videos right on Instagram, you and I are talking about them, and it's like, hey, how does that feel? These little 60-second videos. I started by listening to Jackie Seiden, who I love, on the Evolution Pod Club, another podcast that's great. You can look it up on iTunes. I would listen to Joshua Live, another podcast on iTunes. You can look those up. And I would listen to 15 or 20 minutes, and then I would just go off and start talking. Now I start talking. I'm walking and I'm talking, and it's like ideas come to me. And then I just pick up my phone and I start recording. I am now recording what I am absolutely thinking and believing. I did this thing yesterday. 10 people see one event. 10 people see one event. Nobody has the same description. What does that actually mean? Did one event occur, or did 10 different events occur? Or did we just see the event based upon our perspective on life? If I had all these limiting beliefs, I saw all this fear and all these terrible things. If I have all these empowering beliefs, I saw all these opportunities, and it wasn't that bad. This is a scientifically proven fact that eyewitnesses aren't even reliable in criminal investigations anymore, right? So think about how that affects what we're actually seeing, what you're seeing and what I'm seeing. one event happened, but we see it completely differently. Well, did one event happen?
Yeah.
Or did actually multiple
So that's the
events
whole
happen?
perception thing, which is a good topic to talk about. Before we do that, I do want to just acknowledge and comment that with the videos you're doing on Instagram, you're still doing TikTok as well?
I've slowed because I just didn't have the time
Yeah,
to
you
do
can't do because
both.
you got to record separately on each, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, you
So
do.
you're mainly doing
But I'm
the
going to start
Instagram.
doing them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm going to
Anyway,
start doing back on TikTok.
but the thing is that I had noticed that you actually just get out there and speak as you. You're not referencing anything else. You're just completely speaking as you, which is good. That's really good. So the perception things were interesting because I've noticed that people's memories of past events, for example, and then we'll talk about present events like you mentioned, people's memories of past events are generally very, very poor. And people's, I've noticed, tend to forget much of what happened and much of what was said or discussed or agreed or whatever. So people have completely different perceptions of the past, and most of what actually happened, it seems to me, they have really no recollection of. And people might imagine that they are the exception to that, but I think if one is to examine one's recollection of the past and observe also when other people talk about stuff that happened, especially if you were there, and they don't remember what you remember, or they remember something completely different, you'll actually start to see all the evidence that our memories of the past are really mostly a fiction. And which is quite useful, because once you realize that, you can say, right, why don't I just, to some extent, make it all up to suit me? Because that's what I was doing anyway, so I might as well do it more consciously. And it's a good way to get out of entrapment in the past, because we know that the only joy and the only meaning is in the moment, the present moment. And of course, worrying about stuff in the past is an exercise in pointlessness. And so you may as well change your perception of it, or even your memory of it, so it works for you. And likewise, worrying about something in the future, well, that's just catastrophizing and making stuff up, and dropping down into a current of fear. So forgetting about all the things you're scared of in the future, and how your negative interpretations of the past, and being in the moment. And that brings us, that's where the power is, in the moment. So that brings us to an event. So like you say, 10 people go to an event, they all have a completely different perception. And we tend to think we all went to the same event and we all saw the same thing, and everybody saw, all we know is what we saw, because I can't see through your eyes. So I assume that everybody was at that meeting and everyone has the same experience and recollection. But if you start to peel away the layers a little bit, like you said, and if you actually look at it with some ruthless logic and assessment and some honesty, it's actually, because we believe the thing has because of what we believe about time and events and all the rest of it, it doesn't occur to most people that we could be having different experiences of the same event, or could be 10 events, who knows. So that part is beyond our perceptual ability. But even just the idea that an event happens and everybody sees it differently, which is actually how it is, because everyone has a different perception and mindset and mental construct, everyone in the world does. So it's an interesting thing, isn't it, that it means that the event in itself doesn't have an inherent or intrinsic meaning, does it? So we get back to this point where the event is actually neutral, and the rest of it is all the meaning you ascribe to it.
Well, and then you add in, so take in different ages. You have one event happens, you have a kid, you have let's say it's a 5-year-old, you have a 10-year-old, 15, a 20, a 25, or a 55. Then you throw age in there, right? And then you have the same event happen, and the difference in descriptions, there's nothing similar. It was 10 completely different events based upon their perception. It does empower you to realize that your beliefs, your thoughts, which create your beliefs, which create your emotions and your feelings, that they absolutely do influence your reality and what you receive, right, in your everyday life. Because there's no way for you to tell, with that scenario, there's no way to prove that the single event happened exactly the same way for every one of those people. So then if you put 10 people with the same age, you're going to get differences. Then and because, to your point, your mental construct is based upon your limiting beliefs and the intensity of those limiting beliefs. The younger you are, the fewer limiting beliefs you're going to have, the fewer those
Yeah.
intensity is. You're going to see that in much more pure joy and love. If you can step back into your inner child and start looking at life that way, those events that unfold in front of you, like you and I, when we're like kids talking on these Zoom calls, having a blast every week, right? We look inward and we don't look at it, from that perspective of stacking limiting beliefs of fear. We look at the innocence, the naivete almost of a child, which is the true essence of love.
It's a really good point you make that children don't have those limiting beliefs. So there's two kind of funny stories which I now reinterpret that I want to mention about kids and money. One was when I was really, really young. I might have been like 5 or something, and I was at the grocery store. And there was this kid who was younger than me, and this kid had picked up, this was back in the 1960s when kids had a lot more freedom to do stuff by themselves. This kid had picked up some grocery items and he went to Mr. Johnson, who owned the store, and Mr. Johnson held his hand out for the money because it was all cash money in those days. And this kid had obviously played shop at home, and his version of paying the money was when they held the hand out, you just went tap, tap, tap with your fingers. So Mr. Johnson holds his hand out for some real coin, and this kid goes tap, tap, tap. And I've never forgotten that story from many, many, many years ago. But it's, in a way, this kid was onto it because, yeah, this is a transfer of energy and we can attract whatever money we want. The kid didn't quite have that part mastered to Mr. Johnson's satisfaction. But then another thing that happened with one of my step-grandsons when he was really, really young, and I guess I was trying to give him a, what, do you think money grows on trees kind of a comment, because maybe he had said something about work and me going to work or something. So I said, well, where do you think money comes from? And I didn't say it neutrally, like, what on earth are you thinking, boy, sort of thing. And this little kid says, well, you go to that machine in the wall, meaning the ATM, you just go to the machine in the wall, put your card in and you get money. And in his mind, that's the entire monetary system, right? He had no concept that I was going to work to make money. He just thought, well, you just put your card on the wall and the universe gives it to you, which actually is, I realized, an advanced concept as well as a childish one, because attracting
That's
money.
Beautiful.
So I read this book
It's
about this Indian guru, and it's probably not uncommon. He owns absolutely nothing and he wanders around villages, and he knows that every village that he gets to in the evening will give him shelter and food. And that happens. So the guy owns absolutely nothing, but he trusts. And I suppose, I look at livestock here, like, cattle and sheep and stuff, and you can say they're not worried about where their next meal's coming from, right? Like we are.
It's to me where I think authentically I'm coming from is, and I think I've sent you a few videos. I have an emotional connection and to people who feel in despair. You and I have been there, right? In situations where we felt like, how did we get here, right? How did this happen to us? Whatever the situation was, we were in a place where we felt trapped. We felt like this is not what I signed up for. And this is not what I had planned, right? Whatever the situation was. And my question, I've been fascinated with, always been fascinated with, what was the first thing, what are you saying to yourself when you look in the mirror that helps you get out of that helps you take that step forward, right? Because that to me is the difference between staying stuck in that state, right, for 10, 15, 20 years, 6 months, whatever it's going to be, and beginning to climb your way out. And I mean climb as very figuratively, because the only way to get out of that, right, is to change your thinking. The only way, no matter what you do physically, you have to change your thinking. So for me, what I struggled with when I was on my rock bottom and I was looking out to everybody just kept screaming at you, take action, take action, take action. And I got so angry with take action. When people would say it, I would literally delete the video, walk away, throw the book away. I'm tired of people telling me to take action. I've been taking action my whole life. I've been taking action to support my family, to love my family, and to love everybody my whole life. Stop telling me to take action. And what I finally was able to gain from all of these conversations, which is my true inner self, is everything is perfect at this moment. Take a deep breath. I said, I know you feel that way, but we're going to spend 10 seconds right now feeling gratitude for something. That's it, 10 seconds. I'm asking for 10 seconds of your time. for me to be able to reach out to somebody who's in despair and give them a breather for 10, 20, 30, 40 seconds without telling them that they have to go act, to me is a gift. Now, what are you telling them? What are you inspiring them to do? That's the information I've been looking for. That's what I'm getting. And that's now what I'm talking to people about. That's what I'm telling. That's what you and I are talking about. My truest inspiration is, what am I saying to somebody when they are at that low point, when they feel there's no way out, right? What can I say to them without saying, pull your boots up yourself? But, yes, those are all applicable analogies, but nobody wants to hear that.
No,
right?
No, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. This doesn't help a depressed person that much.
It doesn't, but
no.
And I've said this to you, which I think was one of your special gifts. You've been there. You've had the 7, 8 figures, and then it was dwindled down, and then people were looking to take that from you, and you're at that point of despair and panic, right? Well, whoa, stop! Everybody, stop! Right?
Yeah, deep fear. Yeah.
Right. What do you say to that person? And I've asked a few people, what do you say to yourself in the mirror? And that, to me, if you can find that message, and it's different for every person, right? But the theme is there. But if you could find that message, you could do a world of good. You could be of service to so many people.
Well, Krista Zimmerman, we're working with her because she's dug herself out of some extraordinary circumstances in her life, such as diagnosis of mental illness and alcoholism. Started drinking when she was like 13 or something, insomnia and depression, and she's worked out her own method of doing that, and we're helping her make courses around that. So I haven't seen the depression one, but she dug herself out of that. But what I can say is that years ago, when my late wife was dying, she had an early onset dementia, which is pretty horrible, and anybody that's been through a dementia experience knows that the carer of a person with dementia often ends up with all sorts of massive problems, because the person with dementia is oblivious to it, but the other person can end up pretty devastated. So I saw something about this grief center. So I applied to get some counseling sessions to deal with my grief. And I had a few sessions with this guy who was really, really good. And one day he looked at me and said something that shocked me. He said, I don't think you're grieving, I think you're depressed. Which to me, I was the Energizer Bunny, so that was just not even possible, right? It was just impossible. But I reluctantly realized that he was quite right, and I was in a deep, dark hole. And for me, I realized that somehow I realized that I had created all of the circumstances of my life, the things I did like and the things I didn't like. So that was my first acceptance. It seemed to be easier initially to accept that I'd created all the things I didn't like, rather than take credit, if you like, for all the things I did like, the good things you might call them. So to me, the big first step was, okay, I'll take responsibility for creating my life at some level, whether it's attracting it through the law of attraction or whatever you want to call that process. So that was the first thing. But the next thing I knew was, well, I know I'm doing it, but I actually don't know how I'm doing it. And that's when I used that helicopter analogy, that if you've ever, when you're sitting I used to have friends who had pilot licenses, and so we'd go flying. It was cool. And we'd be in a Cessna or a Piper or something. And, if you do this or if you do that, it's like a boat. The thing does exactly what you expect it to do, right? But when you're in a helicopter, that control, the collective, whatever it's called, it's like that thing has no logical, no obvious relationship to what the helicopter does, because it's a completely different kind of machine. So to me, it was like the helicopter. It's like, yes, I know if I move the stick, various things will happen, and some of those will be good and some of them will be very bad. And so to me, it was like, okay, I feel like I'm a pilot in a helicopter with no idea how to fly the damn thing. And so I would do something and it would create something I liked, and that was good. But how do I do that? And I'll do something, create something I didn't like, and I think, well, how did I do that, and how do I stop doing that? And then eventually I remember hearing this thing, well, your reality is a reflection of your vibration, and the way that if you've got a lot of wobble in your vibration, then you're going to have a lot of wobble in your reality. And then I thought, right, okay, now I understand that. So what's my vibration? Well, you raise your vibration by being in alignment, and the way to get into alignment is to see things in the same way as your inner self, which unlocked another tool, which was, well, how do I know if I'm in alignment or not? And the next part of that was, well, you have this thing called the emotional guidance system. And the emotional guidance system says if you are feeling a negative emotion, it means you're out of alignment and you have a limiting belief that you could choose to uncover. And if you're feeling good, then you are in alignment and you are raising your vibration. So it took me quite a few years, probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years from when I first started that. I had an awakening, sort of, but things always come to me, or frequently come to me, by electronic means. That stuff pops up on my phone or on my laptop, and I had no idea where it came from or how it got there. But it was about 8 or 9 years ago, and I woke up one morning and I picked up my phone, and there was a book open in my Kindle. It was Wayne Dyer's Real Magic, and which is a great book. And over the years, I've read it many times, but I hadn't looked at that book in a very, very long time. But not only was it open on my Kindle, it was open at a particular page, which had the message I needed that day. And that message was the turning point for me. I read that thing and I thought, right. And that was when I started to bounce off rock bottom and started to find my way through that entire process.
What was the message? The summary of it?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I'd
screenshot
it, right? But I didn't realize the magnitude of this event at the time. But it could be, it doesn't matter, because you could pick up that book and open it any page, and whatever it pops up at is probably going to be the thing you need for today.
See, that's the beauty, right? What all of this has taught me is that, and you said it, if my vibrational signal has finally become into alignment and I'm feeling good, you then open up access to this infinite knowledge. You then can reread stuff that you've read a million times and you'll see it differently. Because what happens is that every time it's no different than when you play a sport. The first time you shoot a basketball, the first time you kick a football, right? The first time you do those things, you don't do them great. But the second, the third, when you get to the 10,000th time, when you've been in alignment and you keep going back to alignment, you open up access to information and a realization of that information that you had no knowledge of before.
So that's a very interesting thing you've just raised. As you do this work, different information comes to you, and that does indeed seem to happen. The first thing you mentioned in that discussion was about how you can read something that you read before. Like when I reread stuff from various spiritual boot camps we've done, and I read stuff that I've read 10 or 15 times, and I look at it and I think, has he changed this stuff? Like, that wasn't in there every other time I read it. And it's because it bypassed me completely, because I wasn't a vibrational match to it. It had no meaning for me and I couldn't anchor it anywhere. Yeah, it's an interesting process, isn't it, how that happens?
So my goal now, the idea is to move to a life without goals. And I don't mean that literally without goals, without the traditional idea of goals, meaning that I want these 5 things. I want to raise, I want a new business, I want a new car, I want a new house, I want more money, right? Whatever those goals are, yada, yada, yada. To know that in the present moment, you're constantly expanding and you're constantly expressing yourself in new and exciting ways. And the more you can lean into that present moment, the more you can do what you're doing with love and joy and more expression, right? The more knowledge you're going to gain. See, that to me was my realization that you actually don't remove goals from your life. The one big goal becomes, I'd like to expand vibrationally to such a degree that new information is constantly being and I'm constantly being downloaded with new and incredible information that is helping my journey of self-discovery and expansion. And every single day I can do that. Every single day I just get a little bit more information, a little bit new information. Well, then I know that I'm on that right path. And whatever happens in between there, see, I was struggling with that for so long because I'm a guy that was used to, you do a business plan. You report to your investors, right? Here's your business plan. Here's your numbers. Right? You and I live that life. We're constantly being measured on our performance, right? And now it's like, whoa, forget about that. And if you can be in alignment, if you can live life through joy and love, and just sit with that in the present moment, you put yourself in a position to get new information that could take you even further and higher.
So there's a couple of things that I realized when you were speaking, and it's good insights there, that the more you open yourself up to receiving new ideas and information, the more new ideas and information do come in. And it's recognizing them as such instead of discounting things that you realize, oh, these things have probably always been coming in, but I just ignored them or discounted them. And then the next thing is that if you shift from setting goals and business plans and all that sort of thing, it's scary for a lot of people because they think, well, the wheels will come off, the thing will be out of control, and all of the things that, like, I won't have any money, the business will fail, all that sort of stuff. But it's not that you necessarily would do anything different, but you're doing it from a different place. You'll probably end up having better ideas and doing better things and having more fun doing it. So the business doesn't necessarily change, but your entire mindset around it, instead of, I mean, the thing about a goal is you set a goal and within a few months it's typically out of date anyway. So what was the point of having a 1 or a 5 year goal? It's a fiction, really. And we've talked about this before, that most of the really interesting or amazing things that have happened for me, and I'll speak from my own perspective in business, were never in the plan ever. Like the things that just came out of the woodwork, or things that just emerged, or coincidences, or deals popped up, or something happened. And so all the most important, significant things were never part of the plan. And the same thing, if you look, I always say, if you look on the 1st of January and you've got this idea of what the year ahead will be, then if you remember what that picture was when you get to December 31st, at the end of the year, you think, wow, I had no idea the following things would happen. That was like, I could never have imagined that. And if you knew in January that they were going to happen, you might freak out because you think, oh my God, I wouldn't be able to handle that. But the thing is, these things happen and we do handle them. And I suppose that's because they happen as and when we're a vibrational match to them, even if we don't initially realize it.
That's the big thing you just said here. I'm just taking a quick note. So we set goals based upon timelines. Timelines don't truly exist, right? That's a made up process that we have made here, right? That we follow. And then we set goals upon that. If you create a vision board, and we have so many different people, right, that have created vision boards, and they'll come back to you and they'll tell you these stories. I created this when I was 18. I didn't get it till I was 25, right? I was 25. I was finally living in my house, and I was looking through some old stuff that I had done when I was 18. And I saw this picture, and I realized I was living in the house that I had a picture of, right? Because it wasn't until then they became a vibrational match for that. So what goals and what visions really are examples of where you are right now vibrationally. And if we took that concept into our vision, into our goal, into our dreams, and removed time and said, you will achieve this vision when you become a vibrational match to it, right? And then they do appear, but they don't ever appear on our version, on our identified timeline, whatever that may be, a 12-month or a 24, right? But how many times have you heard those stories, right? Of people tell you that I look back at 5 years ago and 10 years ago, right? Because, and you said it beautifully, they finally became a vibrational match. If we changed our conversations around goal setting and said, you will achieve everything you want in this world once you become a vibrational match to it. And we started to help people identify that. Like, you put that in your course, that as an element in your course, that's intriguing. Like, okay, what do you mean? Because everybody's heard those stories.
Yeah.
But we don't fully understand it until, like you just said, you identified it very clearly by saying, well, you finally get your goals when you become a vibrational match to it. That's a new approach. That's a new concept to goal setting in a really unique, significant way, because you have to tell yourself, I'm only ever going to achieve what I'm a vibrational match to it. And that's the only feedback loop you're ever going to experience.
Yeah. It's a little bit like why affirmations don't actually work for a lot of people. I like affirmations, and you and I probably write affirmations every day. But one of the reasons that they don't often work for people is they don't actually really believe the thing. And another reason is that they think they want it, but they may not actually want what they think they want. I heard a thing the other day, which I thought was amusing and quite true. And the idea is that a person decides they want more freedom in their life, and they decide the way to get more freedom is to get more money. So they take this high-powered job and they work 80 hours a week, and they keep going and going and going on that trajectory. And ironically, the thing that they are pursuing, freedom, is what they lose by taking the job and working 80 hours a week on the job, which I thought there is some truth in that. And it is kind of amusing. It's like you pursued freedom, and in order to get freedom, you gave freedom away.
It's unbelievable when you think about how we get, and let's just say, duped by the illusion of the physical, right? Where everybody wants to, and if you look back, John D. Rockefeller, if you look back in the in the 1800s and up into the early 1900s, there were so many natural remedies in our medical system, and then was actually in books. And then we figured out that traditional medicine could be created from petroleum, and it could be patented, and they could be highly addictive. So then governments changed their protocols, and all of a sudden, homeopathic medicine was deemed silly, woo-woo, as you started out this conversation. We've always had the knowledge, and we've always had the ability to understand how powerful we were, right? But because we've bought into the illusion at times of what constructs people are creating for us, that outside conditions actually can actually affect our perception of ourselves and our world. As soon as we did that, we bought into that illusion, we stopped relying on ourselves. We stopped looking inward, right, to all the things you just talked about, which are naturally there and given to us. Which is why when you ask a child one thing, you get one answer. And most people will always tell you, child doesn't know how to lie. Truth comes from a child, right? The truth of a children, right? Well, it has meaning, right? Because they haven't been able to stack all those limiting beliefs. They haven't been able to buy into the illusion yet. And I'm not saying the illusion is wrong. The illusion is great for some people, and they love it, and it's great. If that's what you want to experience, that's great for you, right? But when you're on this journey, when you're seeing people caught in the illusion, and you want to help them jump out, and you want to help them step out, you have to be able to give them a nudge. And it's that kernel of an idea that they can achieve happiness, and they can achieve joy, the same type of happiness and joy they once had, right? And how do you do that, right? And if you can teach somebody that, if you can help them see that, right, receive new information, right, expand just big enough for a moment to let that information drop in, we're changing the world, right? And that's sort of,
in a couple of pretty big concepts there. You dropped in about external conditions, whether external conditions can make you feel anything, and then the second one was the concept of the illusion. So,
but these were all the ideas when we talk about what I was resonating with, right? And it's beautiful. I think you and I resonate with the same thing, right? We're constantly just ham and egging and finishing each other's sentences. But when I was looking for doing all the Tony Robbins, Dean Grazioso, Dr. Joe Dispenza, right, Mel Robbins, Steve Harvey, reading all of these amazing people, I was looking for that. I was looking for what I just spoke about, which is what Joshua gave me, which was the power and the empowering belief that the answer was always inside of me. And I just had to be open to receive it.
That's an interesting thing, that, because we all start off seeking various teachers of various kinds, and we look for the higher and higher and more elevated teachings as we go. But when we talked before about receiving ideas and being open to more ideas and inspirations, a high version of that is when you no longer need any external teacher to guide you or give you information, because you've learned to actually bring that information in yourself or out of yourself, whatever you want to call it. And that will be a pretty good place to get to. But even the idea you mentioned of outside conditions, controlling conditions, and whether they can make you feel something. But when you first hears that idea, it's a very difficult idea, because it seems very obvious that an external circumstance, winning the lottery or getting a $100,000 tax bill or something, those conditions, most people have a strong reaction to those conditions. And it takes quite a lot of unpacking and thinking to realize, well, to get to a point where you realize the event has no inherent meaning, and it's just what you ascribe to it, and you know that you're going to survive it. It's not going to kill you, so therefore somehow you are going to actually deal with the thing. That's a big one. I'm not sure we're going to manage to unpack that one today.
No, but it is, and you know, Abraham Hicks has this, you know, saying, and I have it written on the board behind me, and I kind of read it every day. And the idea is and Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this as well, just because they gave me the kernels, and then Joshua opened the door for this, where it's the idea is, and Joe Dispenza calls it the Newtonian way of thinking, right? Gravity, right? And it's the idea is that, you know, mass is to gravity as vibration is to attraction, right? Where no matter what, how big you are or whatever's going on, there is going to be, gravity is working, and it's always pulling you down. So if it's a big, huge, massive thing, it's going to pull you down faster and harder. If it's a light thing, it's going to come down slower, right? Well, that's the same way that vibration is to attraction. When you start thinking that these laws, law of gravity, law of attraction, are universal laws, always on, always working, and you could have that type of idea and that type of presence together, and then everything begins to fall into place, and everything begins to open up in new ways. You're no longer dependent upon an outside condition. The apple didn't prove gravity, right? Gravity is always there, right?
Yeah, we just
the attraction
some
doesn't,
aspects of it. Yeah,
right? The attraction didn't, you know, that law of the attraction didn't, you know, your vibration is always there. You're always attracting. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that I was always giving a signal off. So when you said before, how did I create the things I didn't want or the things I did want, is because we sit down and we're like, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes and I'm going to manifest the things I want. Well, there's another 23 hours and 45 minutes left in the day. What were you doing for those other 23 hours and 45 minutes? Yeah, you meditated positively for 15, but what was, you know, you're like, oh my God, that was the vibrational signal that I was sending out. I was angry. I was frustrated, right? I was hurt. I was vengeful. I was disappointed. I was a victim, right? I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm doing this. Once you realize that, like, everything begins to open up. It's like layers of an onion. It's like that blooming onion, right? It's like, boom, holy cow. It's all closed up, right? You just feel like you're just, there's nothing to do. You just got to protect yourself from all the outside conditions. And then all of a sudden there's this idea that no, that's not how it works. And you're like, all right, that's super interesting. How do I experience more of that?
I have to make some comments about mass and gravity from my schoolboy physics classes, that the greater the mass of an object, the greater its gravitational attraction, which is why the moon orbits around the Earth and the Earth orbits around the sun, because the objects with the greater mass become the center, and the others are kind of spinning around, and the centrifugal and centripetal forces balance, and so you stay in orbit. But I think it's true that if you have a heavy object and a light object, we think that the light object falls slower because we think of a feather or a piece of paper, but that's to do with the air resistance. But I believe in a vacuum that the heavy object and the light object will fall at the same speed.
I think everything does, to your point. Yeah.
And I think that
the
gravitational acceleration is
analogy.
The gravitational acceleration is 9.8 meters per second, as I remember that from school. So I think the main thing about the gravity and the mass thing is that the greater the mass of the body, the greater So that's an interesting thing, really, as to how that mirrors back into a vibration and alignment.
Yeah, once you can, we all understand and believe in the law of gravity, right? Nobody denies that. So once you take something that is indisputable, and then you apply it to something that is arguable, right? Whatever you want to say it gives it a new meaning. You're like, well, wait a minute. Yeah.
You have a model that you can reference here. So the thing, I suppose the equivalent there is that the more strongly you are in alignment and the more frequently you are in alignment, then the greater your vibration is rising all the time.
or to your point, you said it doesn't really make a difference what size you are. You're attracting what you're attracting. You're constantly attracting, right? Gravity's constantly pulling things down, to your point, at the same speed, at the same amount. But now it's that if you throw in the fact that that vibration signal is actually pulling from one of two buckets. It's pulling from love and, love or fear. What's it
Yeah,
pulling from?
yeah. And if you actually go with the negative feeling and start to think about, oh my God, what about this? What about that? Then what happens is you
Pulling in
actually
the same.
you just attract more and more and
Yep.
more stuff from the current of fear.
Uh,
Because some people will say, oh no, I'm just being practical. I'm just planning for contingencies. And obviously you do want to plan for contingencies, which is why we wear seatbelts, and in some countries and states, you've got to wear a helmet on a motorcycle. So, I'm not planning to fall off my bike or crash my car, but I just put on my seatbelt. It is the law, but it makes sense anyway. Not that I've ever needed the seatbelt, although I have needed the helmet at times over my life. But or I would have smacked my head on the ground instead of the helmet. But obviously you want to plan for contingencies, but there's a different thing, which is when you start attracting more and more and more negative thoughts. And then people don't realize that these are not external facts that they're just trying to reveal. They're actually attracting more and more negative possibilities.
Well, the idea too is that the mass is never turned off, right? That, to your point, what you were saying, which is really, you did a beautiful job summarizing it, right? The greater the mass, it's like when the mass passes a certain point, that gravitational pull doesn't let go.
All right,
right?
yes. So the law of attraction, right? The law of attraction persists regardless. That is the fundamental of the universe. Because I look at the
people don't get that.
thread. What's that?
People don't get that.
No. I look at the Reddit LOA thread, and there are some people in there who know quite a lot about it. But there are a lot of people who found law of attraction LOA. They think it's some kind of ninja mind trick. It's like, yeah, I've got this thing, I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to attract all these things that I want, which normally have to do with money, makes and jobs, that kind of thing, and get a boy or girl back or whatever it might be. And then, they do their thing and it's like, nah, that didn't really work. I'm not going to do the law of attraction anymore. It's like, that's about it. It's like, no, I don't really like gravity. I've put on, 40 pounds and I don't really like the way it feels. So now I've had enough of gravity. Let's do away with gravity. Doesn't, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist. That's the end. But, I used to think about how would I, give some resources to those people so that they would come in and consume some of my products on my various websites. And I thought, well, I don't know if those people are ready to receive those messages.
Right. So that's, and that gets back to what we were saying before, right? What is that initial message? I've talked about, how do you start, right? Because you and I started, right, in very similar places, right? We started with the goal to achieve as much as humanly possible, then some sort of bad gut feeling of this isn't right. I don't feel good. I can't believe I put all my effort into this and I feel so terrible. And then things sort of fell apart in different ways. And you're like, and then you sort of crawl your way back out. And you're like, okay, I feel much better. And this feels much better. Okay, now how do I help people get here? But meanwhile, that whole process took 15 years. And I'm like, okay, what's the shortcut? How do I help someone now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, people, move along at their own pace on their own journey. And if they need a download of information from you, I guess that'll happen. But it is difficult sometimes to watch people, especially people you care about, when you see them doing it the hard way. But it's good to detach from that as well, because the thing is, if I hadn't had all those unpleasant experiences, then I wouldn't be where I am now, which is actually in a place of more happiness and contentment than I've ever known. And I've also rediscovered a lot of the joy of youth and the joie de vivre and the spontaneous bliss you feel, in nature, all that kind of stuff, which I became surprisingly, I mean, I look back to as a kid and a teenager, I was incredibly attuned to all of that stuff, and somewhere along the line it all vanished. But now it's all coming back, which is partly being in the moment, right, instead of worrying about the past or the future.
So when I was a kid, there was a spot on my front lawn that I could lay down on, and I could look up through the trees at the sky. That it was just these trees overlapped, and it was just this incredible view. And I remember when I had crashed and burned. And I remember, because I was what, 30 something, in my late 30s, early 40s. And I remember going home, lying in that spot and looking for that feeling. And I didn't realize what I was doing until you just said that, right? You just said that, but it like the memory popped in my mind as clear as day.
Did you get the feeling when you went back to the lawn all those years
No,
later?
because I wasn't
No?
open. I was done. But I remember
Right.
wanting it so bad. And I remember going back
Yeah.
multiple times. I went back
Yeah.
multiple times, to lay down there and see and look up and go. And I'm like, why am I not seeing but I remember as a kid, like, wow, this is the most amazing view ever.
Yeah. So that magical feeling that's that's been one of my goals, is to get that back again. So sometimes you don't feel, as when you're older, the way you did about things in the past, because you're a completely different person. So you're never going to have that feeling again, because that was you then and this is you now, and you're very different. But some of it is, it doesn't have to happen in adulthood, but I think it often does, that people, for whatever reason, close themselves off to all of those sorts of feelings, and grow up and get serious concerns and worries, instead of having, because at those younger years you had no care or concerns. You weren't worried about the future or the mortgage or the car payment or the college tuition fees or anything else, right? You weren't worried about any of that stuff. You weren't worried about, your kids or anything else, or the war in Ukraine, or you had none of those worries as a kid. You didn't ever stop to think about where the meal was coming from that evening. You were like my step grandson when he was little, that you just put the card on the wall and the money comes out. You just walk into the kitchen at 6 p.m. and the meal's on the table, like no thought or worry. And the parents did all the worrying, which eventually you pick up on. But so my point is that somewhere along the way we lose all of that. And what I'm saying is that it's all starting to come back, those moments. I'm having those moments again, that for some of them, it's many decades since I had them.
I love that. And to your point, I'm now doing it where literally at 5 o'clock, no matter what I'm doing, I tell my wife, hey, let's go. And we go, and now it's whatever, 6. And we go and watch the sunset in our backyard, because the sun sets in our backyard. And I'm done. I go, let's go. And we sit there for an hour. And I love it.
Oh.
And I see something different every day, to your point. But there's this notion, okay, and this is the importance of the work we're doing, and the importance of us expressing our own ways, where, think about this for a second. I don't care what your job is. And I think you're gonna agree with me, but maybe you don't. And I would feel free to express that if you don't. But no matter what you do, I don't care if you are a box maker, if you're a garbage man, if you're a janitor, if you're the CEO of the greatest company on the planet, if you're Elon Musk, or you're somebody else. Whatever you truly want to do, whatever industry is out there, there is somebody in that industry that is amazingly successful, both financially and professionally. So for us to think that I'm just going to be this or I'm just going to be that, right, is such an incredible limiting belief, that if we can help, people will say I'm stuck here. Well, somebody in that whatever that job is incredibly financially successful and professionally successful and personally successful. Somebody's doing it.
Yeah.
Somebody received information, a download, to be that successful. How do they do it? They became a vibrational match to it. And if we can help people say, if you love what you're doing, it's not on my cards. People that own, car repair shops don't make a lot of money. I'm like,
Yeah. Somebody does. Yeah.
Somebody does,
Yeah.
right? And that knowledge alone, think about that for a second. And then what we do is we tell ourselves, well, that was meant for somebody else. No, it's always meant for us. It's always meant for you. You just have to believe it. And then you have to wait, and then you have to ask for the information. You have to be open to the download. You have to be living in joy. You have to be a vibrational match to it. All these things we just talked about. But we close off, we're resisting, we're angry, we're frustrated, we're resentful, we blame, we become a victim. And then that's where we get stuck.
Yeah. I know it sounds trite and Pollyanna-ish, but I do believe that I know of people who really dislike or hate their jobs, and I do believe that the first step to changing that circumstance is to love and appreciate what is good about it, because it's and you look at those jobs and you say, well, there's some amazing things about that job. I can see there's some things that annoy you, but why did you give precedence to those? You might acknowledge that you don't like those particular bits, but what about all the amazing stuff? Don't forget that. And if you start there, then somehow things do start to change.
I would tell you this, that I really, we've been talking for a year now. I enjoy what I'm doing now. I'm actually enjoying it. I went through a point where I couldn't stand what I was doing. I would literally shake the computer screen, right?
Right.
And now I enjoy it. I'm like, oh, okay, let's get this done. Oh, this is great. Oh, okay, cool. And I'm like, wow, I'm like, that was a lot easier that was really easy. All these things start to pile up, and it gets better and better, right? And it starts with here. What am I a vibrational match to?
Yeah. It is interesting. I mean, that's essentially a form of reframing that we often talk about, that you can reframe how you see your job. And people who say, I hate their job, well, why don't you look at the good things about it? Why don't you appreciate the fact you're getting a paycheck and some of the people that you work with are really cool, and some of the people you meet, the customers, are really cool. I mean, why don't you just start with that and start to emphasize that? Well, there's probably enough wisdom and talking for one day, for one session.
Absolutely. Thank you, my friend.
It's good to see you as always.
Absolutely. Be safe.
Have fun.
All right, you too.
Bye. Bye.